George Lynch quickly made a name for himself as one of hard rock and metal's most unique guitarists. People who heard his songs felt like they were stuck in a maze with no way out. All they could hear was the pounding rhythm of anger, defiance, and the need to be free. Of course, the man behind the guitar was a complicated person. They are strange, stubborn, and often very divisive, but they are always honest. He was kicked out of Ozzy Osbourne's band at the last minute because he was accused of slandering a big record company. He even gave up the name Lynch Mob when he felt it didn't reflect his morals anymore. Not the attention, but his unwillingness to give in has kept George Lynch going for more than 40 years. As a fire that is still raging, wild, unpredictable, and never put out. Not as a neatly packaged tale. Childhood. George Lynch was born on September 28, 1954, in Spokane, Washington. It was a small, cold place where people didn't usually support art. Even though George's family wasn't rich and didn't have a musical past, the monotony of his home life made him turn to sound as an escape. At age 10, he got his first guitar not because he wanted to become famous, but because it made him feel alive. Lynch's childhood wasn't full of big traumas, but he felt very alone and different. George was the kid who never quite fit in a world where everyone did what they were supposed to do. He found refuge in music. He didn't just listen to rock music. He ate up every solo by Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimi Hendrix like they were secret codes to another world. Lynch and his family moved to Sacramento, California, when he was a teenager. That's where he started playing in school bands and letting out all of his crazy artistic urges. Since Lynch didn't have any official training, he taught himself by listening to records, taking amplifiers apart, and trying out every sound effect he could think of. It was more than just how he learned his skill. It was the beginning of his singing style. Outside the norm, rebellious, and not limited by anything. George played in a band in high school called Sergeant Rocks, which was a pretty rude name. He didn't care about money or fame. He wanted to hear his guitar more than anything else, even if it was in a dirty bar or a rundown practice room. In his youth, George Lynch was driven to break things he saw as soulless, like rules, structures, and limits in music. He kept that spirit with him through all of his albums, from Dokken and Lynch Mob to his solo work. A lonely person who wouldn't let anyone tame his guitar. In the late 1970s, when California was in the middle of the hard rock movement, George Lynch made a choice that was anything but simple. To make a name for himself in a sky full of talented people. He went through a lot of obscure bands because he didn't have any ties or a teacher to help him. But his sharp, daring, and unmistakable guitar style always made a mark. Lynch slowly made a name for himself in the Los Angeles underground music scene with one of his first well-known bands, The Boys. The Boys never got a big record deal, but they did get George a lot of attention from people in the business, enough for Sharon Osbourne to ask him to try out for Ozzy Osbourne in 1982. Life seemed like it was about to change for him at that moment. Lynch almost got the part of Randy Rhoads' replacement, but after a good tryout, he was quickly dropped and Jake Ely got it. For what reason? Who you ask will tell you that. Lynch thought that Sharon didn't like his music. Others said he didn't have the right business look. It was a straight blow to George's pride, which hurt but opened his eyes. When that happened, he quit trying to fit in. He made up his own rules and looked for a place where he could do that. At the time, Don Dokken, a singer from Sweden, was looking for a good guitarist to join his new band. George was asked to come in and try out. Luckily, he didn't miss this chance. Don's over-the-top vocals and Lynch's wild, untamed guitar playing together made a sound that was both enticing and dangerous, organized but always on the edge of chaos. Elektra Records signed Dokken, and George Lynch made his professional debut in 1983. Breaking the Chains, their first record, was shaky, but Tooth and Nail, 1984, made a huge difference. From then on, George Lynch wasn't just a little-known artist. He became a major player in American heavy metal. George Lynch came into the 1980s as a warrior who had been turned down before. But with a guitar in hand, he started to rewrite the story on his own terms, making it defiant, bold, and hard to control. Peaks with Dokken and his own problems. Dokken helped George Lynch get to where he was in the mid-1980s, when he was one of the most famous musicians in the American glam hard rock wave. After a slow start with 1983's Breaking the Chains, Tooth and Nail, 1984 was a huge hit for Dokken. There were millions of rock fans who heard George Lynch's razor-sharp riffs and emotionally charged, shape-shifting solos on this record, which went platinum. It was fast, complicated, and urgent, but his playing always showed what he felt. There were a lot of hits, like Into the Fire, Just Got Lucky, and the haunting Power song Alone Again. But the instrumental Mr. Scary, which was written by George Lynch alone, was his artistic statement. It was dark, scary, and nonstop, like the voice of someone who is torn between being smart and going crazy. After that show, George wasn't just the guitarist for Dokken. He was a unique creative force with his own world. After success came more success. Over 1 million copies of Under Lock and Key were sold in 1985. Back for the Attack, which came out in 1987, had big hits like Heaven Sent, Burning Like a Flame, and Dream Warriors, which was used in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Along with bands like Mötley Crüe, Rat, and Scorpions, Dokken became one of the best metal bands in the United States. Lynch was a sonic warrior on stage, with a fierce playing style, hand-painted custom ESP guitars, and an unforgettable personality. But behind the band's huge success was a lot of stress. Don Dokken and George Lynch, two of the group's most artistic members, were at odds with each other. George made the band's sound and technical soul, while Don wrote the words and decided how to market the music. Two huge egos and two different ideas are constantly crashing into each other in the studio, backstage, and even on stage. During their months-long trips, both of them later admitted that there were times when they didn't talk to each other at all. George once left the studio in the middle of a recording session because he didn't want to record if Don was there. Don, on the other hand, tried to get the band to sound more like what you'd hear on the radio, while George wanted to go into more technical, creative, darker, and stranger ground. The Monsters of Rock tour in 1988, where Dokken played with big bands like Van Halen, Metallica, and Scorpions, was the end of everything. On stage, they were strangers, but every night they gave it their all in front of tens of thousands of people. In the background, Don Dokken started working on a solo album. After the tour was over, Dokken formally broke up in 1989. Many people thought it was the end of a great band career. For George Lynch, though, it was like breaking chains. "I'm not trying to say who was right or wrong," he said later. "I just knew I couldn't keep playing music my heart no longer believed in." Dokken broke down. In order to get rid of his old image, George Lynch cut ties with the big brand and got ready to go on his own journey, one without giving in or setting limits. His guitar was all by himself, like a sword that had never been broken. With Lynch Mob, you can find freedom and start over. George Lynch didn't join an already known band to rest or play it safe after Dawkins broke up. So, he made his own group, Lynch Mob, as a clear statement. He would no longer live in anyone else's shadow. Lynch Mob formed in 1989 with the spirit of a band made from ashes. It's fierce, dirty, and won't back down. Wicked Sensation, their first record, which came out in 1990, was the best proof of that. With Oni Logan's strong, bluesy vocals, the record mixed classic hard rock with the dark, tired tones George had been wanting to explore for a long time. Tones that Don Dokken once said couldn't sell. George let loose with his creativity on songs like Wicked Sensation and River of Love. The riffs growled without going overboard, and the solos were like inner conversations, sometimes screaming and sometimes as cold as steel. The record got good reviews and sold more than 500,000 copies, which is pretty good for a new band that came out at a time when MTV was moving away from traditional metal. But the good fortune didn't last. Unfortunately, Oni Logan quit the band soon after the first album came out, and Lynch Mob went through a long time of instability. Vocalists came and went, like Michael Sweet of Stryper and Robert Mason and John West and Andrew Freeman. Each added a different sound, but also made the band less cohesive. George never stopped being creative, but he didn't have a real partner like he did with Dokken. Lynch Mob put out several more records in the 1990s and 2000s, including Lynch Mob, 1992, Smoke This, 1999, Revolution, 2003, and Smoke and Mirrors, 2009, but they were never as good as they were in the beginning. Taste in the public had changed, which was one reason. The music scene was mostly grunge and alternative rock. But another part was that George didn't want to follow the crowd. He played by gut instead of what the market wanted. However, George's Lynch Mob was never just about making songs. He made it a place to try new things, break rules, and share side stories that were sometimes rough and rebellious, but always honest. The band sometimes mixed funk and groove, and other times they went back to more standard metal. There were times when George's music seemed like it was just for him. During a time of racial justice movements and social reckoning in the US in 2020, George made news when he said he would stop using the term Lynch Mob because he thought it was inappropriate to use because it had a history of racist violence. George told her, "I can't keep using that name just because it's well known if it no longer makes me feel good." Some fans were angry about the choice, but it showed something more important. The musician George Lynch did more than play guitar. Having morals was important to him. To keep his music and his honor pure, he was ready to give up a brand that had his name on it. From the ashes of Dokken came Lynch Mob, who was a way to start over. Not to be better than anyone else, but to finally let George Lynch be himself. Lynch's Mob is no longer a big band, but it's still the way he expresses everything that isn't said in riffs, silences, and solos that sound different every time. Later work and ideas about music. George Lynch didn't go away when glam metal became less popular in the 1980s and Lynch Mob lost its appeal to most people. He instead moved into a new age where he wasn't tied to any one band and could travel around like a musical nomad. As a result, people began to fully understand how deep an artist who had broken all rules was. Lynch decided to work with him on a lot of different creative projects. He helped start the supergroup KXM with Doug Pinnick, King's X, and Ray Luzier, which was one of the most famous. Crone. Their first record, KXM 2014, mixed progressive funk and groove metal, which was a sound that no one thought the former Dokken guitarist would make. KXM was George's escape to an unconventional and blatantly uncommercial world of distorted, fragmented, and reflective music. Lynch stayed bold, but KXM showed a deeper, more reflective, and more adult Lynch than ever before. Along with KXM, he joined Sweet and Lynch with Michael Sweet, whose project Striper was a melodic hard rock band with AOR influences that put more emphasis on melody and spiritual depth. Even though the project didn't do very well at the box office, it showed a more mature George Lynch. He didn't just show off his skills, but also knew when to take a step back, listen, and join the message. With the In Machine, Lynch got back together with old Dokken friends Jeff Pilsen and Wild McBrown to make a more grown-up version of what used to be. Instead of being a copy of Dokken, it was a spiritual continuing shaped by life. Lynch was able to bring back the spirit of classic hard rock without getting stuck in memories with songs like Leap of Faith and Burn the Truth. In addition to working on music projects, George started Mr. Scary Guitars, a brand of custom guitars that he makes by hand using his own ideas. It's not just an instrument. Each guitar is working art. It is rough, twisted, unfinished, and completely one of a kind. That's the most complete George Lynch. He only wants to make what he believes in and the sounds that make his heart beat faster. Lynch's creative ideas have long since grown beyond his skills. During an interview, he said, "Don't worry about playing the fastest or hardest stuff anymore. Just something real and soulful to play." Because of this, while many of his peers sought reunions and nostalgia tours to hold on to Dying Light, George chose the less traveled path, constantly creating, changing, and redefining himself. Music never became a goal for George Lynch. He is going on a long, rough trip that always ends in one place, a place where he can just be himself. And the guitar has always been the thing that brings him back, ever since he picked it up for the first time when he was 10 years old. Everyday life. George Lynch has always kept his personal life quiet, even though he was one of the most famous musicians in the golden age of American hard rock. He never had a wild lifestyle, went to a lot of parties, or had scandalous relationships. Instead, he chose a path that was based on creativity and reflection. Still, his life has had its share of fights, broken relationships, and scandal. George Lynch was married before and has kids, including a daughter named Mariah Lynch who is also an artist and makes songs. Even though he doesn't talk much about his family, he has said many times that being a dad kept him grounded when the stage lights went out and the long trips got hard. In California, he has been living a simple life lately. He finds peace in bikes, nature, and making guitars by hand, which helps him get back to quiet after years of chaos. Still, George Lynch has never been one to easily give in. and that very trait has gotten him into a lot of trouble. The long-running feud with Dokken was the first big problem. The media was interested in their fights, games of blame, and endless cycles of breaking up and getting back together for decades. Lynch frequently said that Don had too much power over everything, while Don said that Lynch had drug problems and was unstable. Their fights turned into a story that lasted more than 30 years, derailing many attempts to get back together and disappointing many fans. In 2018, George caused more trouble when he openly said that PV Electronics used prisoners to make their products. The company didn't like the statement and asked for it to be taken back. They also feared legal action. George didn't back down, though. He insisted that the music business can't live on taking advantage of people. People both strongly supported and harshly criticized him for what he said. Lynch stopped using the name Lynch Mob in 2020 when he realized that racial injustice in the US was becoming more well-known. The name included his own last name and had become synonymous with his career, but George chose to let it go because the name Lynch Mob brings to mind a history of executing people based on their race, mostly African Americans. "I can't keep performing under a name that I know could hurt others," he said. Reputation doesn't matter more than integrity. While some fans reacted strongly, calling the decision too sensitive or a loss of identity, George didn't waver. To him, being an artist isn't just about playing well. It's about having the courage to confront the consequences of the legacy one creates. Beneath the fierce guitar work, George Lynch is a man of conviction, clear moral boundaries, and a willingness to stand against the world if needed. He has never chased the image of the perfect rock star, nor has he hidden his flaws. On the contrary, he lets them show in his music, in his lifestyle, and in his choices. Sometimes stubborn, always principled, he holds to one unshakable belief: music must be real, and so must the artist. Current life and legacy. Even in his 70s, George Lynch shows no signs of slowing down. The years 2024 and 2025 mark a defining chapter in his artistic journey, not an ending, but a culmination filled with fire and spirit. True to the uncompromising ethos he's followed all his life. In early 2024, George officially announced Lynch Mob's farewell tour, the final ride, celebrating the band's 35th anniversary. The tour began on February 1st, 2024, in Pennsylvania, and is set to conclude on March 22nd, 2025, in Minnesota, with dozens of shows across the US, Australia, and a standout performance aboard the Monsters of Rock cruise in March 2025. For George, this isn't just a goodbye to a band. It's a thank you to the journey that grew with him, rebelled, failed, and was reborn time and again. Throughout the tour, he and the band also completed a new studio album, along with a live DVD documenting the final performances, serving as a historic memento for fans who stood by Lynch Mob for over 3 decades. But Lynch didn't stop with Lynch Mob. His creative fire still burns through multiple projects. In 2024, he released The Quantum Phase with the End Machine, his band reuniting former Dokken members, infused with technical complexity and the maturity of seasoned musicians. He also continues to lead guitar workshops, sharing his techniques and musical philosophy at industry events such as Richie's Music in New Jersey, 2025, where audiences come not just to learn guitar, but to understand the sonic mindset of a one-of-a-kind artist. Beyond music, George has ventured into something deeply personal: visual art. His new project, Electric Ritual, transforms the guitar into an artistic medium. Each piece is a fusion of recorded sound and physical imagery, individually signed and numbered. For George, it's a way to play music not with ears, but with eyes and emotion, a crossroad between sound, sight, and memory. These endeavors have only solidified George Lynch's legacy. He is not just a legendary guitarist. He's a symbol of relentless creativity, of pure artistic rebellion, and of unwavering loyalty to one's inner voice. Though often overlooked by major award shows, George remains a blueprint for generations of guitarists, not those chasing perfection, but those in search of truth. Because to George, music has never been a performance. It's a ritual where pain, faith, loneliness, and the fire of freedom all resonate through the strings. And that ritual, whether with Dokken, Lynch Mob, or any of his countless projects, still goes on quietly, fiercely, and never ever tamed. George Lynch was never a name splashed across front pages. He never needed chart-topping hits or golden trophies to prove anything. The only thing he's ever truly needed since the first day he picked up a guitar is to live in tune with his sound. In a music world where everything is easily boxed into genres, brands, or products, George Lynch remains a defiant outsider. He plays guitar like it's an instinctual act, writes riffs as if carving blood into strings, and never repeats himself. From Dokken to Lynch Mob, from KXM to the End Machine, from massive stages to the intimate workshop of Mr. Scary Guitars, wherever he goes, there is music that growls, distorts, resists, but always speaks the truth. He was once passed over for the biggest break of his life. He's been misunderstood, controversial, and challenged. But no one, not even time, has ever managed to bend him into any mold. And that, perhaps, is George Lynch's greatest legacy, a guitar voice that refuses to submit raw, defiant, burning with the same spirit as the man who forged it. In the end, what people remember may not be the albums, the tours, or even the solos. It's the presence of an artist who never stopped moving. And if you've ever heard a guitar tone that made your heart skip, a harsh, strange, soul-screaming silence, there's a good chance it was George Lynch. So how about you? Are you ready to step into that world, where sound exists without asking permission? If so, share your thoughts about George Lynch or any guitar moment that changed you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about artists who live true to themselves.